Imagine this. I'm grilling ghost pepper wings, 2.2 million Scoville napalm, for my brother's army squad. Private BBQ. No invites, no drama. Then Karen blasts through the neighborhood.
Free buffet at Rex's. Everyone come, he's feeding the whole block.
I bolt outside. 30 strangers already raiding my grill. Kids stacking plates, moms double-dipping, teens snapping selfies. Karen's playing hostess. Rex is so generous, waving napkins like she owns the place. First bite lands, faces turn beet red, eyes bulge, tears flow. One guy hacks like his throat's on fire, chucks his plate, sprints for the hose screaming. Kids spit into the pool, adults panic chug my beer. I whip out my phone, hit record, this chaos pure gold, and Karen just grabbed the biggest wing. What would you do if a Karen hijacked your backyard BBQ? Drop your savage revenge ideas below, warn them, crank up the heat, or just watch the fireworks. But let me back up and tell you how we got to this beautiful moment of revenge. 2 months earlier, I thought I'd found paradise. Rex Thornfield, that's me, 52 years old, recently divorced electrician who just wanted to disappear from the world's drama. I'd bought this modest ranch house in Willowbrook Estates after selling the family home, and all I wanted was peace, quiet, and space for my secret obsession, growing the hottest peppers known to mankind. See, most guys my age collect classic cars or build model trains. Me? I cultivate Carolina Reapers and ghost peppers that could melt steel. My brother Dale, staff sergeant in the Army, visits monthly with his squad of heat-loving maniacs. We're talking soldiers who consider habaneros a mild appetizer and bet each other on who can handle the most Scoville units without crying. I'd spend entire weekends crafting wings so nuclear that civilians would need medical attention, just to watch these tough guys sweat bullets and question their life choices. The neighborhood seemed perfect when I first drove through. Middle-class subdivision with a mix of working families, retirees, and young professionals. Tree-lined streets, well-maintained lawns, the kind of place where neighbors wave at each other but don't pry into your business. The houses ranged from modest ranches like mine to larger colonials, but nothing too flashy. Most importantly, no visible HOA signs or community bulletin boards threatening fines for grass height violations. What I didn't realize was that this peaceful paradise was secretly ruled by a self-appointed dictator named Karen Kowalski. Karen lived in the biggest house on the cul-de-sac, a gaudy McMansion with enough Greek columns to make the Parthenon jealous. She drove a white BMW SUV with boss lady vanity plates, which should have been my first warning that trouble was coming. 48 years old, real estate agent with perfectly bleached teeth, and mother to 2 entitled teenage sons who blasted trap music until midnight while she lectured everyone else about maintaining community standards. Her husband Mike traveled constantly for some corporate job, which left Karen with unlimited time to terrorize the neighborhood and appoint herself unofficial mayor of everyone else's life. Moving day was brutal. 12 hours of loading and unloading a U-Haul by myself because the divorce lawyer had cleaned out my savings account. The smell of fresh mulch from my new landscaping mixed with diesel fumes from the truck, and my back felt like I'd been hit by a freight train. I was just hauling the last box of electrical supplies when she appeared. Full Karen battle gear, black yoga pants, oversized designer sunglasses despite being 6 p.m., and a clipboard thick enough to stop bullets. Her heels clicked on my driveway like a countdown timer to disaster. Welcome to the neighborhood, that voice. Imagine nails on chalkboard mixed with fake enthusiasm. I'm Karen Kowalski, your block captain. I have some very important information for you. She thrust a stack of laminated papers at me. Community guidelines printed in Comic Sans font because apparently she wanted to insult my intelligence before enslaving me. The rules read like North Korean propaganda. No music after 8 p.m., no work vehicles in driveways overnight, no unsightly garden hoses visible from the street, mandatory attendance at block parties, and approval required for any exterior home modifications, including mailbox colors. Then came the financial shakedown. There's also a voluntary neighborhood improvement fee of $200. It really helps us maintain our beautiful community standards and property values. Voluntary. Right. The way she said it made it clear this was about as voluntary as a root canal. The texture of those over-laminated sheets felt slippery in my calloused hands as I flipped through 20 pages of insane micromanagement disguised as neighbor guidelines. Her handshake when I politely declined the fee felt like grabbing a dead fish, cold, clammy, and somehow threatening. "Well," she said, removing her sunglasses to reveal eyes that could freeze hell over, "I guess we'll see what kind of neighbor you really are." As she click-clacked back to her fortress of pretension, I noticed Mrs. Tessa next door peeking through her kitchen curtains with a look that said, "You have no idea what you just got yourself into." That night, exhausted but curious, I did some online research about the neighborhood. Turns out there used to be a legitimate HOA here, but it was dissolved in 2003 after the president embezzled 30 grand and disappeared to Mexico. Karen's entire block captain authority existed only in her own delusional mind. But I didn't know that yet. All I knew was that the suburban dictator had just declared war on the new guy. War it would be. 3 weeks into my peaceful new life, I discovered Karen's first weapon of choice: death by 1,000 paper cuts. I'm dragging myself home after a brutal 12-hour day running electrical for a new strip mall, my work truck loaded with conduit and wire spools. All I want is a beer and maybe some leftover pizza. Instead, I find a bright orange parking ticket flapping on my windshield like a flag of surrender. Violation: blocking public sidewalk, $150 plus court costs. Blocking the sidewalk? I grab my tape measure from the truck bed and check the distance. My rear wheels are exactly 3 inches from the sidewalk edge, barely touching the concrete seam. This isn't blocking anything unless you're driving a freight train down the sidewalk. The sound of my boots crunching on gravel echoes through the quiet neighborhood as I pace around my truck, measuring every angle. That's when Mrs. Tessa appears at her fence, looking nervous. "I saw her this morning," she whispers, glancing toward Karen's house. 6 a.m., she was out here with a measuring tape and her phone, calling someone. Security camera footage from the neighbor across the street later confirmed it. Karen Kowalski, in full suburban commando gear, measuring my truck placement, and then speed dialing the city inspector like she'd discovered a terrorist plot. But then I took a walk around the block and discovered something that made my blood boil. Karen's precious teenage son parks his lifted Jeep completely across the sidewalk every single weekend, all 4 wheels sitting on public property like he owns the place. Never been ticketed once, not even a warning. The hypocrisy hit me like a slap in the face. This wasn't about community standards or safety. This was about control. Time for some good old-fashioned documentation warfare. I spent the next week walking the neighborhood with my phone, photographing every single parking violation I could find. Karen's son blocking the sidewalk, 17 photos over 5 days. A contractor's van parked in the street overnight. Mrs. Johnson's boat trailer extending past the property line. Even Karen's own BMW parked too close to a fire hydrant during her Tuesday yoga class. 23 separate infractions in 1 week, and somehow I'm the only one getting tickets. My next move targeted Karen where she was most vulnerable: her professional reputation. Years of dealing with contractors had taught me that everyone with a license has something to lose. Real estate agents especially. They need to renew every few years, and part of that process involves maintaining professional conduct in residential communities. I'd learned about this the hard way when a corrupt building inspector tried shaking me down for bribes. My lawyer explained that using government processes to harass people, what they call harassment by process, is actually illegal. The key is documenting the pattern and showing selective enforcement. One anonymous tip to the state licensing board about unprofessional residential conduct and potential harassment of neighbors landed right in Karen's renewal file 6 weeks before her deadline. Public records later showed her application got flagged for additional review. The smell of fresh coffee mixed with righteous anger filled my kitchen as I prepared my formal complaint to the city about selective enforcement. I requested copies of every parking complaint filed in our neighborhood over the past year. Amazing how Karen's name appeared as the complainant on 47 separate reports, but her own family's violations never seemed to make the list. 2 days later, Dale showed up for his monthly visit and found me measuring tire positions like a forensic investigator. My brother took one look at the situation and started laughing. "You know what, Rex? This reminds me of a situation we had in Afghanistan. There was this local bureaucrat who kept filing complaints about our convoy routes, trying to shake us down for bribes. Know what our CO told us? What? When the enemy shows you their tactics in the first battle, they've already lost the war. This Karen lady just taught you exactly how she operates. Now you know her playbook." He was right. Karen had revealed her preferred weapon: bureaucratic harassment through selective rule enforcement. But she'd made one critical mistake. She assumed I was just another victim who'd pay up and shut up. The sound of Karen's BMW pulling into her driveway interrupted our conversation. She climbed out wearing workout clothes that probably cost more than my monthly electric bill, and the overpowering scent of her perfume drifted across the street like a toxic cloud designed to mark her territory. She waved at us with a smile that looked like it belonged in a slasher movie. "Having a nice family visit, Rex?" "Always do," I called back, just discussing some interesting city ordinances and complaint procedures. Her smile faltered for exactly half a second, long enough for me to know my shot had hit the target. "Game on, lady. You just brought a clipboard to an electrical engineer's fight." Karen's response to my parking complaint victory was swift and nuclear. If she couldn't control me through city bureaucrats, she'd create her own authority. 2 weeks later, official-looking flyers appeared on every doorstep in the neighborhood. Emergency community meeting. Declining property values threaten our investment. The meeting was scheduled for Thursday night at the community center, with Karen listed as Neighborhood Safety Coordinator and Acting HOA President. Acting HOA President? That was bigger news than finding out Elvis was still alive. The smell of burnt coffee and nervous sweat filled the community center as about 20 neighbors shuffled into metal folding chairs that creaked like haunted house sound effects. Karen stood at the front like Napoleon addressing his troops, armed with a PowerPoint presentation that would have impressed a timeshare salesman. "Friends, we have a crisis," she announced, clicking to a slide titled "Dangerous Decline in Community Standards." The projector's humming mixed with the sound of people shifting uncomfortably in their seats. "Certain residents are engaging in industrial activities that threaten our property values and family safety." Industrial activities? "Lady, I install ceiling fans and replace broken garbage disposals. I'm not running a meth lab." She clicked to the next slide, a grainy photo of my work truck taken from what was obviously her bedroom window. Commercial vehicles parked overnight, unsightly equipment storage, noise disturbances during family hours. The texture of my jaw muscles tightening was probably visible from the International Space Station, but I kept quiet and let her dig her own grave with an industrial excavator. "That's why I've prepared this petition," Karen continued, producing a clipboard with what looked like enough signatures to elect a small-town mayor. 23 neighbors have already signed, demanding immediate restrictions on commercial vehicle parking and the establishment of a $500 annual HOA fee to enforce proper community standards. $500 per year, with her as administrator? The audacity was breathtaking. She passed around the petition with a smug smile that could have powered the building's electrical system. "With me serving as your elected administrator, of course, someone needs to protect our investments from certain problematic elements." That's when I stood up, pulling out my own folder of documents. Time to drop some truth bombs on this fabricated dictatorship. "Before we vote on anything," I said, my voice carrying 30 years of authority from dealing with building inspectors who thought they were God, "maybe we should verify these signatures." I opened my folder and pulled out a printed list. "Mrs. Patterson, could you confirm you signed this petition?" An elderly woman in the third row looked more confused than a cat in a dog park. "I didn't sign anything. I've been visiting my daughter in Florida for 3 weeks." "Interesting. How about Mr. Rodriguez? Are you here tonight, sir?" Silence. Because Mr. Rodriguez had moved to Arizona 6 months ago, a fact easily verified through the magic of Google and public records. "Jennifer Walsh?" I continued, savoring every second. "Oh wait, she passed away last year. Amazing how concerned dead people are about our property values." The room erupted like I'd just announced free pizza for everyone. Neighbors started examining the petition more closely, pointing at signatures and whispering to each other. Karen's face went through more color changes than a mood ring on steroids. "There must be some clerical mistake," she stammered, but her credibility was hemorrhaging faster than a burst water main. I pulled out another document, one I'd been saving for maximum impact. "Also, I think everyone should know that our neighborhood's original HOA was legally dissolved in 2003 due to embezzlement. We haven't had legitimate homeowners association authority in 20 years. Dead silence. You could have heard a pin drop in a thunderstorm. Mrs. Tessa raised her hand from the back row like a student with the right answer. "I have question. Karen tell me I must pay $200 for garden improvement because my vegetables look too ethnic. She say HOA require only American plants." The temperature in that room dropped about 40 degrees. Even in suburban Illinois, People recognized racism when they heard it served up like a casserole. She squeezed 300 out of me, added Mr. Thompson, a retired mechanic with hands the size of dinner plates. Said my tool shed violated aesthetic guidelines that somehow never existed on paper. 400 here, called out Mrs. Martinez from the corner, for having my grandson's bike on the front lawn overnight. The floodgates opened like a dam bursting. Story after story of Karen's shakedown operation, each one more ridiculous than a reality TV show plot. She'd been running this elaborate scam for years, targeting anyone who looked vulnerable. Elderly residents, single parents, newcomers, minorities, basically anyone who might not fight back. Karen grabbed her materials and bolted for the exit faster than her teenage son running from chores, muttering something about ungrateful neighbors and destroying property values. After she left, the room buzzed with an energy I hadn't felt since my high school football team upset the state champions. Mrs. Tessa approached me with tears streaming down her weathered face. "Thank you so much," she whispered. "I was so scared to speak up alone. She make me feel like criminal for growing vegetables my grandmother taught me." "That stops tonight," I told her, meaning every word. "Nobody gets to terrorize this neighborhood anymore." As people filed out, chattering excitedly about finally standing up to their suburban dictator, I realized something fundamental had shifted. This wasn't just about parking tickets or fake fees anymore. Karen had just accidentally united the entire neighborhood against her. And the beautiful part? She'd done it completely by herself. Karen's humiliation at the community meeting should have been the end of our little war. Instead, it was like poking a hornet's nest with a nuclear warhead. Her revenge came exactly 1 week later at 7:30 a.m. on my only day off. I'm standing in my kitchen in boxers and a ratty t-shirt, nursing my first cup of coffee and contemplating whether pancakes were worth the effort, when someone pounds on my front door like they're announcing the apocalypse. "City code enforcement, open up!" The sound of official authority before 8 a.m. hits different than any other noise on earth. I throw on jeans and open the door to find a tired-looking inspector with a clipboard thick enough to stop bullets, and the expression of a man who'd rather be anywhere else. "Rex Thornfield, I'm Inspector Martinez. We've received multiple complaints about unlicensed commercial electrical work being conducted at this residence." Multiple complaints? What kind of complaints? Running an electrical business from a residential property without proper permits, commercial vehicle storage violations, potential safety hazards from improper electrical installations. He showed me paperwork that looked like Karen had been filing complaints in her sleep. 7 separate reports in 3 days. The smell of my cooling coffee drifted through the open door, mixing with the crisp morning air and my growing sense of disbelief. "Feel free to inspect anything you want. All my personal electrical work is completely up to code." What followed was 3 hours of the most thorough home inspection since archaeologists discovered King Tut's tomb. Inspector Martinez went through my electrical panel with the intensity of a bomb disposal expert, tested every outlet twice, examined my workshop setup like it might contain state secrets, and even crawled into the crawl space to check wire routing with a flashlight that could signal aircraft. The texture of my palms growing sweaty had nothing to do with guilt and everything to do with watching a stranger dissect 30 years of craftsmanship with professional skepticism. Every wire connection, every junction box, every circuit breaker got scrutinized like evidence in a murder trial. But here's where Karen's master plan hit a brick wall at highway speed. My work wasn't just up to code. It was better than most commercial installations. Turns out, 30 years of electrical experience doesn't evaporate just because you're working on your own house. And Mr. Thornfield, Inspector Martinez said, emerging from the basement covered in dust but wearing something approaching amazement. "Your electrical work is some of the cleanest I've seen in 20 years of residential inspections. Where the hell did you learn to route wire like this?" 30 years in the trade. Started as an apprentice right out of high school, worked my way up to master electrician. It shows. He pulled out his phone and started photographing my electrical panel like it was artwork. "Actually, would you mind if I use some of these photos for training examples? This is exactly how residential electrical systems should look." The irony was thicker than Chicago deep dish pizza. Karen's desperate attempt to destroy my reputation had just turned into an impromptu portfolio session with a city official. But wait, it gets better. Inspector Martinez spent another hour picking my brain about techniques, explaining how most homeowner electrical work looked like it was done by caffeinated squirrels with attention deficit disorder. When he finally finished his report, he handed me something that made my entire month: information about applying for a municipal electrical contractor's license. "With work this quality, you should consider going independent," he said. "The city's community center needs a complete electrical overhaul, and frankly, we're tired of dealing with contractors who think wire nuts are optional." After he left, I poured a fresh cup of coffee and settled in to wait for Karen's next move. It came faster than I expected. 2 hours later, Inspector Martinez called my phone personally. "Mr. Thornfield, I have to tell you something amusing. The woman who filed those complaints just demanded a second inspection because she's absolutely certain we missed dangerous code violations. I explained that not only is your work superior to requirements, but I'm recommending you for city contract work." The sound of tires screeching on asphalt echoed through the neighborhood about 10 minutes after that phone call ended. Karen's BMW shot out of her driveway like she was fleeing a crime scene. Over the next 2 weeks, I discovered exactly how creative a desperate suburban dictator with unlimited free time could get. She filed noise complaints about my industrial-level garbage disposal running at 6 a.m. It was a standard incinerator that I used to grind coffee grounds. She reported my outdoor security lights as commercial lighting violations. They were solar-powered pathway lights from the garden center. She even called in a suspicious chemical odor complaint about my pepper garden, which resulted in an environmental inspector showing up to test my Carolina Reaper plants for illegal pesticides. Each inspection ended with officials apologizing for wasting my time and asking if I wanted to file counter-harassment charges. I'd dealt with enough problem customers over the years to recognize the pattern. There's actually a term contractors use for this: death by 1,000 permits. Some people try to weaponize the system, filing complaint after complaint until you give up and move away. I'd seen it work on smaller contractors who couldn't afford the time loss. But Karen had made one critical miscalculation. I wasn't some rookie she could intimidate. And every frivolous complaint was creating a paper trail that would eventually bury her. My neighbor, Mrs. Tessa, started sending me covert surveillance updates whenever she spotted Karen taking photographs of my property from different angles, like some sort of suburban private investigator with boundary issues. "She was measuring your fence height with a ruler this morning," Mrs. Tessa texted, "at 5:47 a.m. wearing camouflage, to spy on her neighbor's fence." The woman had completely lost touch with reality. When I finally requested copies of all complaints filed against me through a Freedom of Information Act request, the results were beautiful. 47 separate complaints in 6 weeks, all from anonymous concerned neighbors, but written in identical handwriting with the same purple gel pen. Karen had just handed me enough evidence to end this war permanently. That Freedom of Information Act request was supposed to be my shield against Karen's harassment. Instead, it became the key to exposing the crime of the century, at least in suburban Illinois. I'm sitting at my kitchen table on a rainy Thursday evening, spreading out those 47 complaint forms like a detective in a cop show, when something makes my electrician brain start connecting circuits. The smell of fresh coffee mixed with the sound of rain drumming against my windows created the perfect atmosphere for solving mysteries. Every single complaint was written with the same purple gel pen, the kind suburban moms use to write passive-aggressive notes about recycling bin placement. Same handwriting pressure, same weird way of making the letter K look like it was trying to escape. Same misspelling of residential as residential. But the detail that made my coffee go cold was the signature line. Karen Kowalski, Acting President, Willowbrook Estates, HOA. Acting President of what exactly? Time for some digital detective work. I fired up my laptop and dove into the rabbit hole of public records like I was troubleshooting a mystery short circuit. County Clerk's Office, Secretary of State Filings, property deed records. I went full CSI mode, except instead of DNA evidence, I was tracking down incorporation documents and dissolution papers. What I found hit me like grabbing a live 220-volt wire with wet hands. Our neighborhood's original homeowners association had been legally dissolved on March 15, 2003, following a financial scandal that would have impressed a Las Vegas casino owner. The previous HOA president, some guy named Robert Tessa, no relation to my sweet neighbor Mrs. Tessa, had embezzled over $30,000 and vanished to Mexico with his secretary and enough community improvement funds to buy a small beach house. The dissolution paperwork was clearer than a perfectly wired electrical panel. All authority of the Willowbrook Estates Homeowners Association is hereby terminated in perpetuity. No individual or entity may collect fees or enforce regulations on behalf of said dissolved organization under penalty of law. Karen's entire block captain authority had about as much legal standing as my neighbor's cat applying for a driver's license. But as I kept digging, the situation went from unbelievable to absolutely criminal. I spent the next 3 hours cross-referencing the old HOA bank records with current residents, then started making phone calls to neighbors who'd survived longer than Karen's 4-year reign of terror. Each conversation made my blood pressure climb another notch. Mrs. Tessa answered on the first ring like she'd been waiting by the phone. "Mrs. Tessa, this might sound strange, but has Karen ever collected money from you for neighborhood fees?" Her voice dropped to a whisper like she was confessing state secrets. "Rex, she's been taking $50 every month for almost 3 years. She said it was required by city law, that I could be fined or even arrested if I didn't pay for landscaping compliance." My calculator told a horrifying story. $50 times 36 months equals $1,800. From an elderly woman living on Social Security, extorted through fake legal threats. Plus the special assessments, Mrs. Tessa continued. $200 last year for emergency community improvements that I never saw happen. $2,000 total, from one sweet old lady who grew the most beautiful vegetables I'd ever seen. The next call was to Mr. Thompson, the retired mechanic with hands like baseball mitts and a heart bigger than his tool shed. "Oh, hell yes, she got me good," he growled when I explained my discovery. $1,500 over 2 years. She claimed my tool shed violated some HOA architectural covenant, and I had to pay review fees to keep it standing, threatened to have it condemned by the city if I didn't pay up. Mrs. Martinez from down the street, $1,200 in ethnic landscaping violation fees because her roses were apparently too colorful for community standards. The Johnsons, $800 for unapproved exterior modifications after they painted their front door navy blue instead of the beige Karen insisted was regulation. Even the college kids renting the house on Oak Street had been shaken down for $300 in noise violation fines that supposedly went to a community mediation fund that existed only in Karen's imagination. By the time I finished my calls at midnight, I'd documented over $30,000 in fraudulent fee collections spanning Karen's entire 4-year operation. She'd been running a systematic extortion racket that would make a mob boss proud, targeting elderly residents, minorities, young families, single parents, basically anyone who looked vulnerable or unlikely to fight back. The scope was absolutely breathtaking. This wasn't neighborhood harassment or petty power tripping. This was organized criminal fraud, complete with fake legal threats, forged documents, and systematic targeting of victims. I stared at my notes spread across the kitchen table like evidence in a federal investigation. The texture of those dissolution papers felt heavy in my hands as the full weight of what I'd discovered settled in my gut. Karen hadn't just been bullying the neighborhood. She'd been robbing it blind for 4 years, stealing from people who trusted her fake authority and were too scared or isolated to question her demands. I had a choice that would determine how this whole thing ended. Call the police immediately and let them handle it through normal channels, or use this nuclear information strategically to protect the entire neighborhood from future predators like Karen. The rain had stopped, and the silence felt pregnant with possibility. This needed to be handled with surgical precision, maximum impact, complete transparency, and total recovery for every neighbor she'd victimized. Karen had spent 4 years operating in shadows, terrorizing vulnerable people through fear and fake legal threats. Her downfall was going to be conducted in broad daylight with the entire community watching. Time to wire up the perfect trap. The perfect revenge plan came to me at 3 a.m. while listening to Karen's sprinkler system flood her driveway for the 3rd time that week. Sometimes the universe just hands you exactly what you need. My brother Dale's monthly visit was 2 weeks away, the one where he brings his army squad for what we call Heat Challenge Saturday. These guys are absolute legends when it comes to spicy food. We're talking soldiers who snack on habaneros like popcorn and consider ghost peppers a warm-up exercise. I've watched Staff Sergeant Morrison eat an entire Carolina Reaper, sweat pouring down his face like Niagara Falls, then ask for seconds. The smell of morning coffee mixed with inspiration as I mapped out my strategy. Karen's psychological profile was crystal clear after months of observation. She couldn't resist controlling neighborhood events. The woman turned simple gatherings into military operations, complete with seating charts and approved conversation topics. Time to use that compulsion against her. I started laying breadcrumbs like I was feeding pigeons, casual mentions of my big cookout within earshot during her power walking sessions. BBQ supply receipts left where she could spot them during her morning garbage inspection routine. Yes, I'd caught her rifling through my trash with latex gloves like a suburban forensics expert. A Home Depot receipt for bulk propane somehow fell from my truck where she'd see it during evening surveillance walks. Restaurant supply store receipt for 60 pounds of chicken wings got left on my kitchen counter with curtains positioned just right for nosy neighbors. My pepper garden became mission control. I'd been growing Carolina Reapers and ghost peppers for 3 years, but now I ramped up like I was preparing for agricultural warfare. These weren't your backyard jalapenos. We're talking 2.2 million Scoville units of pure hell, roughly 400 times hotter than anything normal humans consume voluntarily. Here's what most people don't know about super hot peppers. They're basically edible weapons. The capsaicin doesn't just burn your mouth, it triggers your body's entire emergency response system. Your brain thinks you're being poisoned and activates every defense mechanism available, including panic, sweating, and an overwhelming urge to stick your head in a freezer. The beautiful part? Capsaicin is oil-based, so water spreads the burn instead of stopping it. Dairy products work because proteins neutralize the molecules, but panicked people always grab the first cold thing they see. I spent a weekend preparing 2 wing batches. Batch 1, mild buffalo sauce for normal humans, filmed with standard safety precautions as my evidence batch. Batch 2, nuclear option infused with concentrated Reaper oil so potent that handling it required industrial safety gear and garage ventilation. The texture of those peppers through double-layer gloves felt like handling plutonium, which wasn't far from accurate considering their destructive potential. Mrs. Tessa became my intelligence operative, perfectly positioned at her kitchen window to monitor Karen's activities via text updates. Gus the mailman agreed to delay delivery until peak chaos moment. My across-the-street neighbor volunteered his security camera footage, having quietly documented Karen's harassment for months. Dale's unit got briefed through encrypted military channels, partly because they found the whole operation hilarious, partly because they knew proper evidence documentation procedures. These guys had handled hostile situations and understood staying calm during chaos. The legal foundation was rock solid thanks to my fraud discovery, but I wanted bulletproof documentation. Motion-activated cameras went up around my property, time-lapse equipment ready for food prep recording, written statements prepared about Karen's 4-year extortion racket. My plan was elegantly simple. Act like I'm planning the neighborhood's biggest party without actually inviting anyone. Let Karen's need for control drive her to hijack an event that was never meant to include her. Watch her serve weapons-grade food to innocent neighbors while taking full credit for the hospitality. Yes, I sure eat to you. Everything completely legal, my food, my kitchen, my property, with safety warnings Karen would ignore in her rush to seize control. When chaos erupted, I'd have witnesses, video evidence, and a paper trail showing exactly who invited the neighborhood to my private military gathering. The night before Dale's visit, I fell asleep to the sound of Karen's late-night internet browsing drifting through our fence. She was probably researching community event management, completely unaware she was about to walk into the most perfect trap ever constructed. Dale's text arrived at midnight. Heat seekers locked and loaded. Tomorrow's going to be legendary, brother. Indeed it would be. Karen had spent 4 years terrorizing vulnerable neighbors through fake authority and systematic fraud. Her public downfall was going to be absolutely beautiful. Sometimes the best revenge isn't getting even, it's giving people enough rope to hang themselves, then standing back with popcorn and a camera. Karen's response to my growing confidence was like watching a perfectly organized woman have a complete psychological meltdown in real time. The week before Dale's planned visit, she escalated to full-scale bureaucratic terrorism with the subtlety of a marching band in a library. Her first strike came at 6 a.m. Tuesday, a formal complaint to the health department about commercial food preparation in an unlicensed residential facility. According to her detailed report, I was operating an illegal catering business that posed significant public health risks to the entire community. She claimed photographic evidence of industrial-scale food storage and unsanitary preparation conditions that required immediate investigation and possible quarantine of the entire block. The health inspector who showed up Wednesday morning looked like he'd lost a bet with the universe. Mr. Thornfield, I'm Inspector Williams. Someone reported you're running an unlicensed restaurant out of your kitchen. This is probably going to be awkward for both of us. Come on in, I said, opening my door wide. Coffee's fresh if you want some, and I promise it won't give you food poisoning. What followed was the most thorough kitchen inspection since Martha Stewart's comeback tour. Inspector Williams examined my refrigerator temperature logs, tested my water pressure, swabbed my cutting boards for bacterial analysis, and even checked the expiration dates on my spice rack. The sound of his clipboard pages flipping mixed with my refrigerator's quiet hum as he documented everything from my knife storage to my trash can liner situation. But here's where Karen's master plan hit a brick wall made of reality. My kitchen wasn't just clean. It was approaching surgical suite levels of organization. 30 years of electrical work teaches you that messy workspaces can literally kill you. So I'd applied the same standards to food prep that I used for live wire installations. Mr. Thornfield, Inspector Williams said, closing his folder with genuine bewilderment, your kitchen setup is cleaner than half the restaurants I inspect professionally. The temperature controls, sanitation protocols, organization systems, it's actually impressive. Then he dropped the beautiful mini twist that made Karen's sabotage backfire like a defective firework. You know, with a setup this pristine and your obvious attention to health codes, you could probably qualify for a legitimate catering license. Ever consider going into the food business professionally? He handed me information packets about small-scale commercial food licensing, while Karen's BMW screeched out of her driveway like she was fleeing a crime scene. Over the next 3 days, Karen's desperation escalated to performance art levels of absurdity. She filed water department complaints about my excessive usage, suggesting I was running an underground dishwashing facility. She reported my solar pathway lights as commercial lighting violations that were probably code for secret restaurant signage. The fire department got a call about suspicious chemical odors from my pepper garden, resulting in a confused fire marshal showing up to test my Carolina Reapers for methamphetamine production. Each inspection ended with officials apologizing and asking if I wanted to press harassment charges. The smell of Karen's desperation hung thicker in the air than her usual perfume cloud, which was saying something considering she wore enough fragrance to choke a rhinoceros. Mrs. Tessa's surveillance reports became increasingly frantic. Karen photographing my house from multiple angles like a real estate stalker, measuring my fence height with surveying equipment that looked borrowed from a construction site, attempting to interrogate delivery drivers about my suspicious package frequency. She asked if you were building bombs, Gus told me during Thursday's mail delivery. I asked what kind of bombs. She said anything involving electrical supplies from Home Depot. Electrical supplies. For bomb construction. From Home Depot. The woman had gone so far off the deep end that she couldn't see the shallow end with a telescope. But Karen's masterpiece of fictional authority came Friday evening, a cease and desist letter that looked official enough to fool a federal judge, complete with fake legal letterhead that probably violated 17 different fraud statutes. By authority of the Willowbrook Estates Community Safety Oversight Committee, it declared, you are hereby ordered to terminate all unlicensed food service operations and cancel any planned community gatherings pending comprehensive safety compliance review. Community Safety Oversight Committee? That was a new department in Karen's imaginary government structure. The letter threatened police intervention, health department seizure of my commercial equipment, and civil litigation for reckless endangerment of residential populations. It was signed by Kay Kowalski, Chief Community Safety Coordinator, in purple gel pen, naturally. Time for some Academy Award-level performance art. Saturday morning, I made sure Karen could observe me reading her legal fiction while standing in my driveway, letting my shoulders slump like a man crushed by bureaucratic defeat. I called Dale with windows open, speaking loud enough for the entire neighborhood to hear my surrender. Dale, I'm really sorry, but I have to cancel tomorrow's cookout. Some kind of community safety board issued a cease and desist order about gatherings. I can't risk legal problems right now. Karen's kitchen curtains practically danced with satisfaction. I spent Saturday moving visible party supplies inside, dismantling outdoor speakers, and acting like someone beaten down by fake legal authority. Karen's victory lap around the neighborhood that evening lasted so long, I thought she might run out of gas celebrating her imaginary triumph. But while Karen basked in her fictional legal victory, I was conducting real final preparations under cover of darkness. Dale's unit confirmed arrival through encrypted military channels. Dual wing batches prepped and camera ready. multiple recording devices positioned for comprehensive documentation. Everything was perfectly aligned for Karen to walk into the most beautiful trap in the history of suburban warfare. The sound of her late-night celebration party drifted through our fence. She was probably updating her LinkedIn profile to include Chief Community Safety Coordinator. Sweet dreams, Karen. Tomorrow, you wake up to your worst nightmare. Sunday morning arrived with the kind of perfect weather that makes suburban dictators feel invincible. I'm sipping coffee at my kitchen window, watching Karen's house like a hawk monitoring prey, when her front door opens at exactly 8 a.m. She emerges wearing what can only be described as her victory uniform: crisp white capri pants, a navy blazer that screamed, "I'm in charge here," and those ridiculous oversized sunglasses that made her look like a celebrity hiding from paparazzi. The click of her heels on concrete echoed through the quiet morning as she marched straight to my front door with the confidence of someone who'd never faced real consequences for anything in her entire privileged life. The doorbell chimed like a death knell. "Rex!" Her voice carried that fake sweet tone that made my teeth ache. "I just wanted to personally thank you for being so responsible about yesterday's safety situation. It really shows what kind of neighbor you can be when you follow proper community protocols." Community protocols. Right. The protocols she'd invented in her own delusional mind. "Just trying to be a good neighbor, Karen," I replied, letting my voice carry the defeated tone of a broken man. "Thanks for keeping everyone safe with your oversight." The smell of her satisfaction mixed with her overpowering perfume created a toxic cloud that probably violated several EPA regulations. She practically glowed with the smugness of someone who thought they'd won the war instead of walking directly into enemy territory. "Well, I'm actually planning a proper community gathering for this afternoon," she announced, like she was bestowing a royal favor upon peasants. "Something organized and safe, unlike these spontaneous events that can get out of hand. I've already invited several neighbors to join us for a lovely afternoon of appropriate socializing." "Several neighbors? Lady, you mean the people whose money you've been stealing for 4 years?" "That sounds wonderful," I said, maintaining my defeated act while internally celebrating. "I hope everyone has a great time." "Oh, they will. I've taken the liberty of using your backyard setup since you're not using it anymore. My own space is a bit formal for casual gatherings. But don't worry, I'll handle all the hosting duties and make sure everything meets proper community standards." There it was, the beautiful admission I'd been waiting for. Karen had just announced her intention to trespass on my property and hijack my equipment for her own ego trip. "Of course," I said, like a man too beaten down to fight anymore. "Whatever you think is best for the community." Her smile could have powered the neighborhood grid for a week. "Wonderful. I knew you'd come around eventually. Some people just need proper guidance to understand how communities really work." After she click-clacked back to her fortress of pretension, I immediately texted Mrs. Tessa. "Operation Golden Wings is a go. Karen took the bait completely." The next few hours were a masterclass in military-level coordination disguised as suburban chaos. Dale's unit arrived in civilian clothes at 1 p.m., carrying coolers and looking like any other group of friends gathering for a weekend BBQ. The beautiful part was that they actually were here for our monthly heat challenge. I just hadn't mentioned the special entertainment I'd planned for this session. "Brother," Dale said, embracing me with a grin that could have been classified as a weapon, "the boys are ready for whatever hellfire you've cooked up this time. Morrison brought milk just in case, and Johnson's wife packed ice cream for emergency relief operations." "Trust me," I replied, firing up the grill while keeping one eye on Karen's house. "Today's going to be legendary for reasons you haven't even imagined yet." At exactly 2 p.m., Karen emerged from her house like a general preparing for battle, carrying a clipboard thick enough to use as body armor and wearing an apron that proclaimed "World's Best Hostess" in glittery letters. The sound of her heels on my driveway mixed with the sizzle of wings hitting the grill grate created a symphony of impending justice. She surveyed my backyard setup like she was inspecting troops, nodding approvingly at the tables, chairs, and grill that she was about to commandeer for her own twisted purposes. "Rex," she called out, waving like she was greeting subjects at a royal garden party. "I hope you don't mind. I've invited the whole block to enjoy some proper community fellowship." "It's exactly what this neighborhood needs." "The whole block. Perfect." "Not at all," I replied, pulling out my phone to start recording. "I'm sure everyone will remember this gathering for the rest of their lives." Mrs. Tessa's text arrived right on schedule. "Neighbors arriving. She told everyone you're hosting free community BBQ. This is happening. Through my kitchen window, I could see people starting to appear from various houses. Families with kids, elderly couples, college students from the rental properties. Karen had managed to invite 30 people to my backyard for a party I'd never agreed to host, using food I'd never offered to share. It was absolutely perfect. Dale caught my eye and nodded toward the grill where 2 identical trays of wings were waiting. One tray marked with a small blue toothpick, mild buffalo wings for evidence and normal human consumption. One tray marked with a red toothpick, Carolina Reaper death bombs that could hospitalize a Navy SEAL. "Which batch are we serving to our uninvited guests?" he asked quietly. I watched Karen directing people to load up plates while taking full credit for the wonderful community feast she'd organized for everyone's enjoyment. "The red ones," I said, hitting record on my phone. "Definitely the red ones." The moment Karen grabbed that first red-marked wing and announced herself as hostess of my backyard, I knew justice was about to be served hotter than the surface of the sun. "Everyone gather around," she called out, waving a sauce-dripping wing like a conductor's baton while 30 neighbors filled my backyard. "Rex has been so generous in providing this wonderful feast for our entire community." "Generous? Lady, I'm standing right here filming you steal my food." The smell of barbecue smoke mixed with anticipation as Karen took her position at my grill like she'd conquered enemy territory. Kids splashed in my kiddie pool, adults grabbed beers from my cooler, teenagers posed for selfies with wings that were about to ruin their entire week. "Make sure everyone gets plenty," Karen announced, loading plates with nuclear-grade Carolina Reaper wings while basking in the attention like she'd cured cancer. "I seasoned these myself with a special blend that's absolutely perfect." Special blend. Oh, this was beautiful. Dale's military unit positioned themselves strategically around the yard, cameras ready, looking like they were just enjoying a casual BBQ instead of documenting what was about to become the most viral neighborhood meltdown in internet history. Mrs. Tessa watched from her kitchen window with her phone recording, while Gus the mailman had mysteriously timed his delivery to arrive during peak chaos. The first bite happened at exactly 2:17 p.m., according to my phone's timestamp. Karen bit into the biggest wing on the tray, a monster-sized piece loaded with enough Carolina Reaper concentrate to drop a rhinoceros. She chewed confidently for about 15 seconds, smiling and nodding at neighbors like she was savoring a gourmet masterpiece. Then her face changed. The transformation started subtle, a slight widening of her eyes, a small furrow in her brow like she was trying to solve a math problem. Then the capsaicin hit her pain receptors like a freight train carrying molten lava. Her eyes went wide as dinner plates. Sweat erupted across her forehead like someone had turned on sprinklers. Her mouth opened in a silent scream that looked like she was witnessing the apocalypse. "Oh my God," she gasped, dropping her plate and grabbing for the nearest cold drink, which happened to be my beer. Oh my God." But the beautiful part about Carolina Reapers is the delayed reaction. While Karen was discovering what 2 million Scoville units felt like, 30 other people were still cheerfully chomping down on wings that would soon turn their world into a living hell. The domino effect was absolutely spectacular. Mr. Thompson, the retired mechanic, finished his first wing and reached for another. "These are pretty good, Karen. Nice kick to them." 10 seconds later, "Holy mother of... what did you put in these?" The sound of panic spread through my backyard like wildfire. People running for the water hose, diving into coolers looking for ice, kids spitting into my pool while parents frantically searched for milk or ice cream or anything that might stop the burning. Karen, meanwhile, had grabbed my garden hose and was spraying water directly into her mouth, which only spread the capsaicin oil around and made everything infinitely worse. "Call 911, she screamed between gulps of water that were making her suffer more. "He poisoned us! He poisoned the whole neighborhood!" That's when I stepped forward with my phone still recording, speaking in the calmest voice I could manage while chaos erupted around me. "Actually, Karen, these are Carolina Reaper wings that I prepared in my own kitchen, on my own property, for my brother's army unit who specifically requested super hot peppers. I never invited anyone to this private gathering." Her mascara was running down her cheeks like black rivers of defeat as she tried to process what I'd just said through the nuclear fire consuming her mouth. "You never told anyone they were ghost pepper wings?" shouted Mrs. Martinez, desperately chugging milk from my refrigerator. "Actually," I continued, my voice carrying over the chaos like a prosecutor delivering closing arguments, I never told anyone about this gathering at all. Karen announced to the neighborhood that I was hosting a free community BBQ without my knowledge or permission. The sound of sirens approaching mixed with the moans of pepper-poisoned neighbors as the full scope of what had happened started sinking in. "She invited us," gasped Mr. Johnson, his face redder than a fire truck. "She said you were feeding the whole block." "That's right," I said, addressing my phone camera like I was hosting my own documentary. Karen Kowalski, who has no authority in this neighborhood whatsoever, invited 30 people to my private property to eat my private food without my permission, then took credit for hosting the gathering. Karen tried to speak, but only managed to produce sounds that resembled a dying walrus. That's when the police arrived, followed immediately by paramedics and a news crew that had been monitoring emergency scanners for weekend stories. Officer Rodriguez surveyed the scene of pepper-poisoned neighbors and one supremely calm homeowner holding documentation. "Sir, we received reports of a chemical attack?" "No chemical attack," I replied, handing him a prepared folder. "Just Carolina Reaper wings prepared legally in my own kitchen. Here's my food preparation documentation, health department approval, and complete video evidence of how this situation developed." The news reporter immediately recognized a goldmine story when she saw one. "This is Channel 7 News with a breaking story from Willowbrook Estates, where a neighborhood BBQ has turned into a spicy disaster." Karen, still drooling from pepper-induced misery, managed to gasp out her final desperate lie. He planned this. He tried to hurt us." That's when I delivered my mic drop moment, addressing the news camera with the satisfaction of someone who'd waited months for this exact opportunity. Ladies and gentlemen, what you're witnessing is the natural consequence of someone who spent 4 years collecting fraudulent HOA fees, harassing neighbors with fake legal authority, and filing dozens of false complaints with city agencies finally meeting the reality of her own actions. Karen Kowalski invited these people to steal my food and then blamed me when her theft didn't go as planned. The reporter's eyes lit up like she'd discovered the fountain of youth. "Did you say fraudulent HOA fees?" I have complete documentation proving Ms. Kowalski has collected over $30,000 in illegal fees from elderly and minority neighbors using fake legal threats. The real HOA was dissolved in 2003. Karen's face went from pepper red to ghost white as her entire criminal enterprise got exposed on live television. "And there you have it," the reporter concluded while Karen was led away by police, still drooling and now facing fraud charges. A neighborhood bully's reign of terror ended by ghost pepper justice. The last sound I heard as the chaos died down was Dale's voice, barely containing his laughter. "Brother, that was the most beautiful thing I've ever witnessed." 3 months after the great ghost pepper incident, my neighborhood had transformed from a suburban dictatorship into an actual community. Karen's arrest made evening news and went viral with 2.3 million TikTok views. The comments became a support group for people fighting fake HOA bullies, with hundreds sharing harassment stories and asking for legal advice. The aftermath was swift and beautiful. Karen pleaded guilty to fraud charges, theft by deception, and filing false reports. The judge ordered full restitution of $32,000 stolen from neighbors, plus penalties that forced her to sell her McMansion. She fled to Florida within 6 weeks, real estate license permanently revoked, suburban dictatorship career permanently ended. Her house sold to a young couple with twin toddlers who actually wave at neighbors instead of measuring their property lines with surveying equipment. But the real transformation was watching our neighborhood heal from years of fear-based compliance to genuine community cooperation. Mrs. Tessa organized our first legitimate gathering in decades, a potluck where people brought whatever they wanted without approval from imaginary safety committees. She served those ethnic vegetables Karen had tried to ban, and they were absolutely delicious. Her bok choy became the most requested recipe at future gatherings. Mr. Thompson reopened his neighborhood tool lending library, helping families with repairs and teaching kids mechanical skills without worrying about violating made-up aesthetic guidelines. His banned tool shed became a community resource center where neighbors shared equipment and knowledge freely. I launched Willowbrook Electrical Solutions with that municipal contract Inspector Martinez had mentioned. Word spread through satisfied customers, and within 2 months, I had more residential work than I could handle. The business grew so successfully that I hired 2 apprentices and started a scholarship fund for students pursuing skilled trades. Every job comes with proper safety education, knowledge that actually protects people instead of controlling them. Dale's Army unit adopted our neighborhood as their unofficial weekend headquarters. My monthly Ghost Pepper challenges became legendary community fundraisers where neighbors watch military professionals cry while eating super hot wings. We've raised over $15,000 for veteran organizations through voluntary participation instead of mandatory fees. Mrs. Tessa's paralegal daughter, Lisa, who'd helped research Karen's fraud case, became a regular dinner guest. Professional consultation evolved into something much more personal. We're planning our first official date next weekend at a restaurant where nothing on the menu exceeds jalapeno-level heat. The legal precedent from Karen's case helped other neighborhoods identify similar scams. I get weekly emails from people dealing with fake community coordinators running unauthorized fee schemes. My documentation methods became an informal guide for fighting neighborhood harassment. Our community safety education program, a legitimate volunteer organization with transparent finances, now offers workshops on identifying scams, understanding real versus fake authority, and documenting harassment. We partner with local police teaching elderly residents how to verify government contacts versus fraudulent shakedowns. Annual Good Neighbor Day draws families from surrounding communities who want to experience genuine cooperation. No mandatory fees, no compliance committees, no purple gel pen regulations, just people choosing to share food and friendship because it makes life better. The sound of children playing has replaced Karen's clicking heels and shrill demands. Laughter echoes where threats used to flourish. The smell of various cultural foods cooking replaces the toxic cloud of Karen's territorial perfume. My pepper garden thrives, but now I mainly grow mild varieties for neighbors developing heat tolerance. Carolina Reapers get reserved for special occasions and visiting military personnel who specifically request pain with their poultry. Sometimes I stand at my kitchen window, coffee in hand, watching Mrs. Tessa tend her beautiful garden while kids ride bikes on sidewalks their parents don't measure for imaginary violations. Mr. Thompson tinkers in his celebrated tool shed while college students walk dogs without fear of fictional noise citations. This is what community actually looks like when people choose cooperation over control, when neighbors support each other instead of exploiting vulnerability, when shared enjoyment replaces enforced compliance. Karen spent 4 years building a kingdom based on fear and fake authority. What emerged from her defeat is infinitely more valuable. Authentic relationships built on mutual respect and voluntary participation. The best revenge isn't getting even with bullies. It's creating something so much better than what they tried to destroy that their memory becomes just a cautionary tale about power corrupting small minds. But I gotta admit, ghost peppers don't hurt either.
You know, Rex's situation, it took him 8 months to build that case. 8 months of documenting every complaint, every forged signature, every bogus fee collection. Most people would have just paid the $200 and moved on. But here's the thing about these self-appointed HOA presidents. They always overplay their hand. Karen could have kept her little scam running for years if it just stayed small. But she had to go after the wrong guy, had to make it personal with those parking tickets and fake cease and desist letters. And that ghost pepper ending? I mean, you couldn't write that better if you tried. The woman literally invited the entire neighborhood to steal his food, then took credit for hosting the party on camera while eating Carolina Reapers. The fraud charges stuck because Rex had every receipt, every complaint, every conversation documented. $32,000 she had collected over 4 years from neighbors who were just trying to avoid trouble. Makes you wonder how many other neighborhoods have their own version of Karen running around with clipboards and fake authority. How many people are paying fees to organizations that don't actually exist? If you got your own HOA horror story, drop it in the comments. The wider, the better. And if this one hits home for you, well, hit that subscribe button. There's a lot more where this came from. Sometimes the best defense against bully is just letting them defeat themselves. Rex just gave her enough rope.